Hell on earth is in China, Masszanzia labor camp, and one man managed to get his story out. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Masszanzia labor camp was known as one of China's most brutal prisons. Survivors call it hell on earth, and a lot of them carry the scars to prove it. The things that happened in Masszanzia, those stories usually don't see the light of day. But in 2013, this woman, Julie Keith, went shopping for Halloween decorations at Kmart, and inside was something truly spooky, a desperate letter from a prisoner inside Masszanzia. That real-life story was turned into an edge-of-your-seat documentary called Letter from Masszanzia. I sat down with director Leon Lee to find out more. Thanks for joining us today, Leon.
Thank you for having me.
So for those watching who haven't seen Letter from Masszanzia, what is it about?
It's a real-life message-in-a-bottle story. Mm-hmm. A woman in Oregon found an SOS note in a package of Halloween decorations she purchased from Kmart. It turned out it was written by a man in one of the most notorious labor camps in China, Masszanzia labor camp. And it took us 3 years to track down the letter writer, and he told us the full story.
Wow. So Masszanzia, can you paint us a picture of what Masszanzia is? Because it's not a normal labor camp.
Well, it started from it being a normal labor camp, and then quickly it turned out to be what they call a national center of excellence for re-educating and transforming people, mainly through torture. So
excellent.
In Chinese dissidents' words, this is a place of nightmare. This is a place they would rather die than being sentenced to.
So when you heard about the letter, it was found by, what was her name, Julie?
Julie Keith.
Julie Keith. When you heard about that story, were you like, wow, I got to make a movie about this?
I immediately flew to Oregon, where the Julie Keith lived, and I talked to her. She was very cooperative, and I think I interviewed her several times over the years. I knew there had to be an amazing story behind it, because at that time I had interviewed over a dozen survivors from Masszanzia labor camp. I just couldn't imagine how could this letter writer find pen and paper.
Yeah.
How could he write the letter under the watchful eyes of the guards? How could he manage to hide it? And who is this person?
Yeah.
So I really wanted to find out the story behind it. And because of my previous films, I had a underground network in China, consists of dissidents and journalists, and I put the word out. As I said, 3 years later, one day somebody told me, I think I got your guy.
Wow.
And we had our initial meeting over Skype.
Because at this point he was out of Masszanzia.
Right, he had been out for a couple of years, and he was in hiding. He certainly knew that the letter was discovered, and he knew it was one of the reasons that the entire labor camp system in China was abolished. And that's probably why he did not want to advertise that he was the letter writer.
It probably wouldn't have been good for him. But then you come out with this movie saying that he was the writer of this letter. Were you concerned either for his safety or for your own safety in making this movie?
Well, certainly for his safety. It wasn't an easy decision for me to, after talking to him, to decide to make this film, because obviously we both realized what it meant. But he said something that changed my mind. He said, look, I am providing technical support to the underground press now. And these are the people who are the most targeted by the Chinese Communist regime. So if I get caught, whether by helping other people or helping you making the film, I face the same consequences. if I take the same risks, I might as well do something more effective. So that's how we came together to work on this film. But then there was still one problem. As I said, because of my previous films, I couldn't go back to China.
Because you've done several movies critical of the Chinese Communist Party, correct?
Certainly not welcomed by the Communist Party. And at the same time, Sun Yi, the letter writer, he did not know how to use a camera. So we too have to find ways to mainly work over Skype. That involves training for him, how to use a camera, how to collect audio, how to take pictures or shoot videos without being discovered, and how to use a microphone. How does he even transfer footage to me? So that whole logistical things we had to work out one by one.
So not only was he the star of your movie, he was also the cameraman inside China for you.
Quite often, yes.
Now, one part of the movie that was amazing to me is at one point he went back to Masanjia to get footage. And I remember you said like, that's a terrible idea, you can't do that. But he went ahead. What was going on with that?
One day over our Skype meeting, he said, I have an idea. I want to go back to Masanjia labor camp and interview the former inmate guards. I said, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
He felt they were quite close to him, but I told him, no matter how close you think you were, these were the people that could just turn back and call the authority. But he really wanted to go back, and he said this is not only for the film, but more importantly, this is for them. This might be their only chance to find redemption. So he went back and he compressed the footage, he encrypted and sent to me online. I watched the two interviews with two former inmate guards, and I was in tears. One guard was at one point telling people how good he was as a torturer, and the new methods he invented himself, and how effective they were. But as soon as he mentioned Sun Yi, he completely changed to a different person. He talked about how his perception on Falun Gong, how his entire point of view on life was changed by knowing Sun Yi.
And that's an important part. Sun Yi was in Masanjia for practicing Falun Gong. So of all of the things you could make a documentary about, why do you feel it's important to make one about Falun Gong?
Well, if he wasn't practicing Falun Gong, I probably would make the film anyway. It is a rare story that connects Western viewers to human rights violations in China. But he happens to be a Falun Gong practitioner, which is all the better, because the persecution against Falun Gong is one of the largest in the world now in terms of human rights violation. It's been going on since 1999, and in terms of its scale and severity, it's probably one of the largest atrocities we're facing nowadays.
And as I understand it, Sun Yi wrote multiple letters while in Masanjia, and only the one was found, correct?
Yes.
What was Julie's reaction when she got this letter?
Sun Yi wrote probably 20 letters. And by the way, it took him more than one night to write one letter. So it's obviously very difficult for him to find time to write it. And Julie's initial reaction was that she thought it was a hoax. So she immediately went online, Googled Masanjia labor camp, and did her research. And very soon she realized this is not a hoax. This is real. And she wanted to do what Sun Yi asked her to do. It was in the letter that the writer wanted the recipient to send the letter to the human rights organization. She did. She tried to contact Human Rights Watch, I believe, but it went nowhere. So she did not stop. She then tried to find, I think she posted on Facebook, and then she contacted her local newspaper. It became a front page story on Christmas Eve. And then after that, it just went viral. CNN, Fox News, New York Times, it's everywhere.
Have you faced any pushback from the Chinese Communist Party for making this documentary?
Not on this film, not so far, at least not I'm aware of. But for my previous films, in particular Human Harvest, which was about large-scale organ harvesting on prisoners of conscience in China, I received lots of interference. For example, in festivals, in other forms of distribution, quite often there were pushbacks.
What has been the response to Letter from Masszanja?
We had our world premiere at Hot Docs in, I think, May last year. So it's about a year on the circuit now. We've been in, I think, over 40 festivals, winning over a dozen awards. And almost every screening, I see people in tears. I have people walk up to me and telling me that they are filmmakers themselves. They are well aware of all the techniques, but somehow this film moved them to their core. Government officials wanted to take action after seeing the film. The film screened in European Parliament in Brussels, screened in Canadian Parliament. We're still organizing screenings in other parliaments around the world. And we have lawmakers telling me that knowing an individual story like Sun Yi's journey is so much more powerful than reading reports. So basically, from all walks of life, people suddenly realized that whatever impression they had on China before, it just opened their eyes to see very different things, different aspects of China.
So Sun Yi did a lot of the camera work inside of China. As I understand it, he also contributed sketches to the documentary.
Yes, part of the film was animated because obviously it's very difficult to do reenactment or going back to inside Masszanja labor camp. So it was an interesting story. Again, we had our Skype meeting one day, and Sun Yi wanted to show me some artwork. And he obviously, he kept a sketchbook after he was released from Masszanja, and he wanted to remember his experience inside. So right then we decided to do animated sequences based on his own sketches. So his sketch has a particular style that's similar to traditional Chinese graphic novel. And when I asked him, he told me since he was young, he loved reading traditional Chinese graphic novels, and he would quite often practice drawing the figures on the book margin. So he became quite good. And later on, he became an engineer, so he studied drafting, which also helped, I suppose. So he himself did all the sketches for the key scenes. And based on that, we had a professional team who did all the animation, but making sure we still follow his art style.
Well, I certainly recommend Letter to Masszanja for anyone watching. If somebody wanted to see the movie, well, where should they go?
It's on various digital platforms now. The common ones, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play. It's also on YouTube. And we also have physical DVD and Blu-rays available in different outlets. if you visit letterfrommasanjia.com and click on watch, you see dozens of platforms where you can watch the film.
Great. We'll definitely provide a link to that at the end of this video. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on a really powerful documentary.
Thank you.
If you haven't seen Letter from Masanjia, I highly recommend it. If you'd like to see it, click the link here. It will take you to a trailer of the movie, which will then take you to a way to rent the movie on YouTube.